We're glad you're with us today for our Bible study. We hope that the study of the book of Acts has been helpful to you. I'm Fred Davis, pastor Mending Fences Cowboy Church. We meet at the former Reba McIntyre Barn on Highway 109, just south of Gallatin, just north of Lebanon. And if you're not actively involved in a church, we would love for you to come and to be with us. We think you would enjoy our time of fellowship together. But we are in the book of Acts. We're up to the 14th chapter. We have been looking in the book of Acts at the progress of the early church. And this is a continuation from the life of Christ when he died on the cross, rose from the dead, spent time with his disciples, and commissioned them to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. So what we find in chapter 14 is this is the first missionary journey of the Apostle Paul. He has with him Barnabas. Now, they have been driven out from where they were, and that's when they went to Iconium. And so we'll begin with chapter 14 and verse 1. The same thing happened in Iconium. Paul and Barnabas went to the Jewish synagogue and preached with such power. I feel that's an important ingredient. We should be very compassionate about preaching the Word of God. So many of our churches today do not preach the gospel of Christ. They want to tell you how that you can get along with your neighbor, how you can do this, how you can do that. But listen, folks, we need the message of Jesus Christ. And Paul was filled with power. So a great number of both Jews and Gentiles became believers. As a result of Paul's preaching, a large number of people believed the gospel that Paul preached. So there was a large number. Some of the Jews, however, spurned God's message and poisoned the minds of the Gentiles against Paul and Barnabas. Now, this is the second time this has happened. Seems like everywhere Paul goes to preach the gospel, he faces opposition. Well, we need to keep in mind that is the work of Satan. Satan wants to prevent the gospel from getting out. Why? Because Satan's desire, his plan that he wants to carry out is to get as many people to go to hell as possible. He does not want people to hear the gospel, believe the gospel, and find themselves in heaven. So that's how he is trying to destroy the plan of God to get the gospel out. So, the Jewish people rejected the message. They even poisoned the minds of some of the Gentiles and the Jews. And that's what usually happens whenever the gospel is preached. So, the apostles stayed there a long time, preaching boldly about the grace of God, and the Lord proved their message was true by giving them power to do miraculous signs and wonders. So not only are they preaching the gospel of Christ, but they are now performing miracles. What is the purpose of a miracle? It is to help people see the gospel is true. That's why we see great miracles and signs and wonders. And so that is what was taking place. But the people of the town were divided in their opinion about them. Here's a division. Some people believed the message of Paul, some didn't. So the people in the city of Iconium were divided. Some sided with the Jews and some with the apostles. So I ask you today, which side are you on? Are you one that believes that Jesus Christ is the Son of God who came to this earth, who allowed men to crucify him on a cross? He was dead, he was buried, and he was risen again the third day. Or are you on the side of the Jewish leaders who taught the Old Testament commands, but Jesus was not included? You got to decide. You're either for Jesus or you're for the Old Testament teachings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's up to you. Now, does that mean that what the prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were wrong? No, they gave to us the Word of God, but it was not complete until Jesus came and gave himself, and he was risen again, and that is the truth of the gospel. But the people of the town were divided in their opinion. Some sided with the Jews, some with the apostles. Then a mob of Gentiles and Jews, along with their leaders, decided to attack and to stone them. Now it has become physical. It's not enough just to proclaim the gospel. So as they see the miracles and signs, here's kind of my thinking. When they saw the miracles and signs, it overpowered any opinion the Jewish people had. They knew it was of God. They had to stop it, so they incited a riot. And when the apostles learned of it, they fled to the region of Iconium, to the town of Lystra and Derbe and the surrounding area, and there they preached the good news. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that everywhere they preached the gospel, they were being rejected. They were not being received. The gospel just simply caused a great division. But notice, if you will, that the apostles did not refrain from preaching the gospel. They did not quit. Even though they were driven out of two cities, they continued to preach the gospel. Why? Because they knew it was the truth. They were eyewitnesses of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They knew it was for real. They staked their life on it. No matter where they went, wherever they found themselves, they were preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, in verse number 8 of chapter 14, while they were in Lystra, Paul and Barnabas came upon a man with crippled feet. He could not walk. He was crippled. He had been that way from birth. Everybody knew him. He would be brought to the temple and people would give him money just to survive. Everybody knew him. So he had never walked. He was sitting and listening as Paul preached. Looking straight at him, Paul realized that he had faith to be healed. That gives us a little bit of the conditions to experience a miracle. He had faith. And so, Paul called him in a loud voice. Paul said, "Stand up." And the man jumped to his feet and started walking. What a miracle this was. But please keep in mind, whenever we read about miracles, it was for the purpose of supporting the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what's going on here. He was confirming the gospel that Paul and Barnabas was preaching. So, verse 11, when the crowd saw that what Paul had done, they shouted in their local dialect, "These men are gods in human form." So the crowd drew the conclusion that Paul was a god, little g, not a big G. But they looked at him as a god. Well, it goes on to say, they decided that Barnabas was the Greek god Zeus and that Paul was Hermes, since he was the chief speaker. It is amazing to see how confusing people can get. Here they were listening to Paul preach the gospel. Here's a miracle that's taken place, and all of a sudden they concluded that Paul and Barnabas were gods. That's just not true. They were apostles. They were proclaimers of the Word of God. And they were not gods in themselves. We live in a time of multiple gods. I say to you, be sure to check out what's really going on. When people say that they're a god, or people proclaim them as a god, don't listen to that. Because Jesus Christ is the one and only true, capital G, God in existence. There's one and one only. Put your faith and trust in Him, and you will be on a solid foundation. Thank you for being with us today.